with that, oh, perfect. We have a few minutes for questions, maybe 15 or 20. I have a few that I can seed the audience with, but I'll pause for a minute and see if anyone out in the audience has a question. Yes?
Yeah, as mentioned in our the discussion for the Matsu Borough Fish and Wildlife Commission, you were talking about, or there was one thing where you were talking about with the culvert removal, you were also talking about weirs and weir improvements. And in the Matsu Valley, we've got, I believe, four weirs that have not had funding for complete seasons for the last 3 years. Just thinking on the top of my head there, all 4 of those weirs have escapement goals, salmon escapement goals, that we've been unable to count throughout the seasons. We might have a partial count for some seasons, but that really doesn't tell you if you made the initial goal or the minimum goal or not even. So with that, would that be something that would be an improvement, funding those projects? Could that be an improvement in that we would actually get numbers?
I'm not sure, but I have a phone a friend right here.
Thanks, Andy. So the way that WEIRS is used in the bipartisan infrastructure is primarily to deal with fish diversions associated with dams or other structures, which is a different type of weir than the sort of weirs that the Department of Fish and Game manages on most of our, like the Little Sioux or the Deshka. So unless one of our agency friends corrects me, my understanding is that the infrastructure funding is not available for funding the ongoing fish counts like you're suggesting.
And you're specifically referencing DOT's program. It's called their culvert program, that it includes culverts and weirs, but it's for removal of either of those to provide fish passage, not for using weirs for fisheries management like you're describing. So Austin's dead on, but it's very specific to a program through the US DOT and federal highways.
Yeah, I looked into that recently. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Sue?
I have two things. One, I'm curious if, so in Alaska we often have a lot more potential for protection than tons of restoration. I'm excited about the culvert opportunities, but I'm curious if any of you are aware in those programs if land acquisition is allowed in any of them. And then my second point is I have a little feeling of caution. We're about to have a whole bunch of money for a whole bunch of culvert projects, yay, except we already know that we have these are going to be low bid projects, and we have lots of new people who are going to get into all kinds of new construction work that they've never done before because there's a ton of money. And I guess there's a little bit of caution to those of you who get to approve projects, if there can be a little more, oversight in the bid process so that we don't have sort of disasters happening in the middle of the effort to do good work.
So I don't know who was around when ARRA came around, but what we saw was that a $400,000 culvert became a $700,000 culvert when we had these kinds of amounts of money, and so we do anticipate on top of inflation, our money might go a little bit less than it did before. And as far as oversight, you know, Fish and Wildlife Service did put together kind of a fish passage document that is for Alaska that is just exceptional. And I think we do have a lot more resources, but as far as capacity, well, for NOAA, last year we had one person, now we have, you know, 2 people in the state, so I can't say that we really have a lot more capacity, but we definitely saw that with ARRA, that there was a lot going on and not a lot of, and prices did go up, so I would anticipate we see that again. And then as far as conservation, we do have projects, for the restoration center, it would need to be tied to a project. So there would be a project and then the area would have a conservation easement on it. But in the coastal resilience, there is, if it's tied to a project where it is enforcing some kind of coastal resilience or protecting, there is some money for conservation easements or land conservation.
And I know that with the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund, we have funded land acquisition. I'm not sure if it is also tied to other attributes or if it is just solely land acquisition. I'd have to consult with the lead coordinator, Jenny, on that and get back to you. But it's definitely within our program. And then to speak to, our local capacity, I am just coordinating the one program, so I don't have kind of the stretch that Erica does, so.
And Sue, just to get back to the question about land acquisition, land protection, there are a handful of the line items within the infrastructure law right now that are certainly allowing that. One of them is very specifically through the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. And so with your partnership with Cooey and Ketchimek Bay, there's an opportunity for the research reserve there to put proposals in annually for potential protection work in the Ketchimek Bay region. As far as, a lot of questions about land acquisition for like the ecosystem restoration funds and the America the Beautiful initiative in particular. And NIFWIF's choice in year 1 was to focus more on the restoration and planning side of things, and with land protection not completely off the table, but probably not encouraged, although we're trying to figure out how to maximize that, knowing that that's a need in Alaska that we can leverage through some of these funds. And your caution is well heard. We feel that and absolutely positively are trying to do what we can to mitigate that as well.
Yeah, hi, this is Kendra. One of the people that presented mentioned this tool, I think it was called CREST. I know there's another tool called FFOLD. I've heard of a couple other tools. Is there any way to find out what kinds of tools are out there and sort through which tool to begin with to start the sorting process, in addition to now that we've got your emails, which is great, but even that much seemed confusing to me, all the different tools that might be out there.
Yeah, agreed, Kendra, and I think we'll start with, Eric mentioned the rural playbook. There's a tribal playbook. There's a number of resources on the White House's webpage that are actual manuals of sort of how to navigate some of this. As far as specific tools related to infrastructure funding, I don't know that it's been developed yet across the board, but clearly some of what you guys are working toward for Alaska, it sounds fantastic.
I will just say, we did fight having them put in there, like, you will use this tool. And it was actually strongly heard from Alaska to not mandate a tool, because usually when there's a national tool, it doesn't fit for Alaska. And so we actually did, it is vague, which makes it hard to know what to use, but that is on purpose, and Alaska was a large voice in that, in stating, you know, whenever you make a national tool, you know, we never feel like we fit in that tool, and so, you know, while it's confusing, there is kind of room to move and make your own definition within the language.
I'll just give another plug for the White House Build website. The guidebooks on the White House website, you would think that that's full of jargon and not going to be helpful. It is helpful. So feel free to explore that. And there are a ton of resources there. Any additional questions? Yes.
Thanks so much to all the panelists. It's been really good. I think Mike's slide really summed it up. This is kind of crazy. It's mind-boggling, the amount of money at Dwarf's era. I mean, this is kind of crazy times we're living in. But with those crazy times, my question is specific to Mike and Erica. With money comes support and technical support. Aaron, you mentioned that. That's one of my biggest concerns is with all this money, how the last time this year we didn't get technical support. What in your crystal ball, what does this FY23 look like for including technical support with some of these proposals? And are there specific funds that might be more amenable to technical support?
Well, my answer is pretty simple. The PCSRF fund did get an extra person, and our money is going out the door. Like, so there's not a lot of technical support.
Yeah, I think it's true that I am an extra person. I'm only here during the bill fund, so it's a term position. I'm around just for this situation. And we're always available to walk through the database with reporting or talk about priorities and anything like that, so you can always reach out directly.
Yeah, so obviously this is real, right? There's a number of funding opportunities through infrastructure law that provide the ability for planning and capacity building. So some of them have that written directly into it, that's an allowable expense. There's others, like our National Fish Passage Program, that has money that's supposed to be intended to go on the ground, which means we have to deliver it with the existing staff we had. Aaron mentioned the concept of hearing from federal agencies about the need for capacity. We're feeling the need for capacity and know for sure that without additional appropriations or funding elsewhere, it's not coming through the infrastructure law. The law is focused, and each program specific, but the law is focused on putting the money on the ground, as Erica mentioned. So it's a real challenge, and I do not have a crystal ball for that.
Something that folks might want to consider, and again, I don't think that this will totally apply, but I know that federal DOT and HUD separately are both, they both have this program called Thriving Communities, and they've issued some sort of notice for twofold. One for capacity builders, to apply for, so they can get on some federal list to be called upon when needed. Then there's another application track for entities looking for capacity, for additional capacity. That might be something to look into. I don't know that will get at what you're trying to achieve, but it's something.
Any additional questions? Maybe I have one I'll pose to the group. In my infrastructure coordinator role at TU, we're often looking at projects in Alaska, in the Great Lakes, in the Pacific Northwest. And in Alaska, we're fortunate to not have a host of listed species. What can we do in the Mat-Su or in Alaska more generally to make our proposals more competitive as compared to, a project dealing with Coho Passage in Oregon that has listed fish.
So our RFPs under IIJA specifically put on equal footing fisheries managed under the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council and ESA listed species. This is a change from any of the RFPs that we've put out in the Restoration Center since. I would say also, while we don't have endangered species, if you guys have looked at the disaster declarations for the state of Alaska, you can cover quite a lot of area, and identifying your fish species under those disaster declarations is always a help. Also, any subsistence or tribally important fish species also ranks a population very highly.
Yeah, I definitely resonate that with PCSRF. We prioritize ESA listed species and subsistence on the same level. I know in the lower 48, it seems like ESA is, it's louder, but up here, we don't discriminate against any waterway that you are applying a project towards. Everything is considered subsistence. And with regards to making your application more competitive, definitely referencing, like you said, the declarations of disaster, having plans for recovery or specifically addressing limiting factors, things like that really help to demonstrate the need. So I would say that's kind of what I can offer right now, but we can definitely talk more about that too.
I'll add to that, and it's maybe a little bit of a gripe towards my agency, is that it doesn't mean that you're on equal footing, right? Because the ESA fish has this whole recovery plan, and so you can say, I'm doing exactly what the recovery plan did, and so saying, okay, we're gonna rank them equally doesn't quite get you there, right? But that's why strategic plans such as the Matsu-NIFHAP plan, being able to cite a document saying, you know, before the money was on the table, we knew this was important, because, you know, everything becomes important when we see numbers like this, right? And so how are you going to show, you know, in your proposal that, no, you know, people have been working on this for a decade or for 5 years, you know, like something like that. And that is these strategic plans. And so that's where it really becomes important to say, you know, we don't have a recovery plan, but you know, all the people in this room have come together and said this is important and what we want to do, and it just gives a greater validation to proposals.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that, Austin, you're obviously uncovering something that's been a challenge for Alaska conservation for a long time, right? I mean, we've been in a situation where we're trying to do things proactively, and many opportunities we still have to do that, and you can wave your arms all you want. When there's recovery going on for endangered species, you're trying to get the same federal funding, listed species get typically get the attention, and that's just human nature, I think, is putting some of that toward that. But I think we talked a little bit about this earlier in the prioritization, fish passage prioritization conversation, trying to look at ways that we can connect the value of the resources that we have here in the health that they are, the significance of that habitat for maintaining that health and preventing recovery and preventing listing of ESA species has as much, if not more, value than trying to figure out how to actually recover them once they're on the list. So there's ways to think about trying to really speak to the value of the fish and the habitat that we have to put them on equal footing and get that attention that's required up here.
Maybe, I know we're running against time. This will be our last question.
So I'm wondering, is there in any of the bills an Alaska set aside? And then I know some of the Beautiful money went through U.S. Fish and Wildlife and straight to NIFWIF, and how do we set the priorities for Alaska and so that they're met? Because the cookie cutter approach doesn't work, just like the tools doesn't work. Working through NRCS, we find that quite a bit when the practices for conservation practices are done, and they're based on Middle Iowa pricing and that kind of thing. So just asking funding set aside for Alaska, and then how do we get to NIFWF and set priorities for Alaska?
So I can start. I have not seen a specific Alaska set-aside. I have seen tribal set-asides within different funding streams within the law. Yet that's not just Alaska-specific, that's nationwide. So, and then I had another thought, and it's gone, so I will come back to that later. Oh, sorry, NIFWF priorities, yes.
That,
Yeah, so the funding that the Department of Interior gave to NIFWF, I think, was a little bit of desire at the national level to get money on the ground really quickly. And the Fish and Wildlife Service has a cooperative agreement with NIFWF to actually try to inform what those priorities are. Is that the best course of action? Can we do that better? Absolutely. Should we actually keep the money in 23 through 26 and actually deliver it through the Department of Interior rather than funneling it through NIFWF? If it were me, I'd say yes, but it's not up to me. So it's one of those, I don't know what's going to happen for 23 and beyond. That was just for FY22 money that went into that America the Beautiful initiative, and the service absolutely tried to inform what those national priorities would be. But once, you know, there's a lot of desire at the federal level to have public-private partnerships, and that's why funding the money through a place like NIFWF then is more engagement on the private side as well to bring additional money in that the Fish and Wildlife Service couldn't do. So there's a lot there, and I agree that it's a concern, and like I said, if I don't know what's going to happen for 23 and beyond, and we'll see what the department chooses to do with those ecosystem restoration funds.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much to our, oh, did you have an addition? Sorry. Okay. Well, please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists.